Okay, we're gonna call this meeting to order, April 1st, 2025. Lily, roll call, please.
Mayor Palmer,
Here.
Counselor President Beachide, here, Counselor Berggren,
Here.
Counselor Frazier,
Here.
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stancliffe, here, all present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome, everybody. Do we have any agenda adjustments, Lily?
Not at this time.
Announcements, awards, proclamations? Okay, public comments.
We have Carol Holm.
Carol Holm, I'm at 1212 Second Avenue in Gold Hill. I just wanted to make a comment about the Gold Road Sports Park and how wonderful it looks in the mornings when I'm walking at about 7 o'clock along the bike trail out to the water intake building. And I just want to say that I think Fred and Neelan have done a wonderful job of getting everything spruced up for the spring and the summer. It looks better than it's, in my opinion, looked in many, many years. And it's because they worked in the winter to get some of the work done and didn't wait till spring to start. And so it's just a real pleasure to walk out there. You can actually see the river because they've trimmed all the trees up, the limbs. And so it's really nice. And they've also trimmed down to the river for the various trails that go down. And so they're working very hard, and I just wanted to publicly acknowledge all the hard work that they're doing, and I hope that they keep it up. Thanks.
Thank you. And I would also like to commend Counselor Martin. He's been out there cutting up a few of those trees that were wind blown down, helping out. So, and I agree with you. We walk that all the time, Carol, and it looks really nice. Next.
Go back to.
Okay, so we have the opportunity tonight, Mr. Mayor, to get a presentation from our planning staff that we're contracted with through Rogue Valley Council of Government. And so there's several items that we have up for discussion tonight. And I'm going to actually turn it over. We'll start with recommended fee schedule. But we have Ani Heater and Dick Converse with us tonight, and so they will be presenting, and I will have some items up on the screen for you.
Hello, I'm Ani Heater. And for this task, we took and we evaluated the fees for Gold Hill and then did analysis for the other cities within the area to see what the average fee for each planning action would be. We created a chart to show in most cases, Gold Hill is below the average. The reason for the fee analysis was to see how we compare and to see if we can cover all planning expenses within the fee. So we're not shorting the city when people come in to pay for their land use applications. The analysis shows the different types of permit or planning actions that they would be applying for. And then we use those recommendations or use those numbers to form recommendations. I'm not sure, do they have the chart in the packet? Is that what they ended up with?
Correct. So in front of you behind the packet, you'll see a chart with squares. It's going to take each of these items and talk about the process, and I can, let's see. I will also bring that up and let's see. Oh, we had it. Let's see. Here we go. So it's also, well, I will get it pulled up. So, before you, you have it, and it has on the far right what our current fee is and some other recommendations there, but I don't know if you're there yet. Tell me if you want a different chart up.
It has, the application types broken down. And then it says the type of review that will be necessary to complete that approval or grant that approval. And then for the fee recommendation section, we, put the current fee, a minimum fee, which would cover all planning costs, hopefully. And the recommended fee is, typically a little higher because it prevents the city from having to send an invoice and collect more funds. It's better to collect them all up front so the citizens are aware what the total cost will be. And so that's why there's 3 different fees, the current fee, the minimum fee, and a recommendation.
And there's actually 4 pages to this section, and part of this analysis that I had requested RVCOG help us with is what we find is we get billed independently from RVCOG, and then we have to forward those on to the individual applicant and such. But what we're finding is that our current fee schedule is not covering the costs of what's going through, and not always possible to do that. And so I did ask for them to do an analysis of where we at compared to other cities, as well as if there's recommendations. And one of the things that was found in the analysis as well is there's processes in our system that we're not charging fees at all for, that need to be covered because it costs the city to do those items. And so that's part of what this is here, is they also looked at not just the fees we're currently charging, but all the processes that we actually have to do. And out of it is a recommendation of adjusting those fees to cover the cost. But we're also going to be in this process, and you'll see afterwards, there's a resolution to cover this. So right now, we just wanted to show you that we had a comparison between the other cities, that there was an analysis of the different types. And then based on that, what type of approval, what level of approval is it like? Is it handled by staff? Is it handled by the planning staff alone? Does it have to go to the planning commission, or does it have to go to the full council? So kind of put those in a chart of what type of approval it is, where the regulations in our code are related to it, and then what the recommended fee should be related to that, so that it covers our costs. We don't have a planner in-house. And so everything we do, we are contracted to go to RVCOG, but then we get billed for everything we ask them to do on our behalf because of that contract. We're also going to be updating our applications for land use. So when folks come in, they'll match the processes and be a lot more clear than what we've currently been using, which is a zoning clearance form that kind of is covering everything, even things that it doesn't have anything to do with. So, is there a different one you want up on the screen?
No, I didn't know if they had questions regarding the chart for the recommended fee. I do. Well,
Oh, we want that one? I do. I did print that one out in front of them as well.
That one we're looking at on the screen right now? No.
Hold on, let me see. I downloaded everything and then I managed to restart the computer. So sorry about that.
I do have a question for you guys.
okay,
On here, it has some different. Under section 3, type 1 procedures. Under C, says planning actions, access to a street. Plus engineering hourly rate. Isn't that usually put on the contractor?
typically it's public that completes those applications that are
It says engineering hourly rate.
Which one are you on?
First
Section
page of the
4.
recommended schedule. Yeah.
Number C.
You were there. See,
Section 3C.
oh,
And the reason I bring it up is it's something
Okay,
that's been
so-
a couple of times.
So in land use decisions, and so there's a level at the plan review, there's different stages that things get reviewed. And there is a level that engineering reviews things, and we have a contracted engineer that we get charged per hour on that as well. And there's a level that Public Works actually inspects So one is, the planning side is what can you do with your land? And what does the code allow you to do with your land? There's other portions of our code that we're not addressing tonight per se, but there's fees related to that with the building permits and the review. Part of it is public works is required to look at that. Right now, we've been being billed by Southern Oregon Water Tech, who's been doing that on our behalf of the public works, because we don't have a public works employee trained in that. And our engineering is through Atkins Engineering. And so again, being that we have minimal staffing, currently everything that we do related to land use for the most part is contracted out, either through RV cog for planning. The county covers the building permits and some of the inspections, but the review of the plans before they go to the county, right now, Southern Oregon Water Tech has been doing that until we can get somebody trained up in that process. And Adkins is doing our engineering. So there's multiple parts that we have to inspect and make sure they meet city. And in this case, when it comes to the city, it's like, where are our water lines? Where are the sewer lines? Where do they connect to the stormwater to make sure things go there? How deep do they need to be? Is this going to impact when that driveway connects with the road? Is it going to impact the quality of our road? And is it undercutting the levels of the road? So there's different things that are required to be looked at by Public Works versus engineering versus planning versus the county.
And the reason why I brought that up is because normally contractor would submit plans. But if you found that you need to have engineering, then you give it back to the contractor and say it needs to be engineered. So I brought it up. It should fall back onto the contractor for engineering costs. Any costs that we have as a city could be included in that.
So some of those reviews that we need to be done aren't a set fee amount because we don't know how long it's going to take the engineer to review the plans that are submitted to make sure they meet our standards. So the contractor's engineer is not going to have the details of the city streets or the city's utilities. Go ahead if you have more to add, Dick. We just have to have you on the mic.
I'm Dick Converse with RB Cog, and I have been retired for 6 years. But my understanding of the situation, yeah, I understand the thing of having a stamped engineered
Mhm.
plan. And that's great. That says that the engineer is certified, that it meets the standards. There comes a point, though, where the on-site work needs to be inspected.
Mhm.
And we don't do that. That's where we would have to hire an engineer for.
You didn't inspect. for that.
So
You didn't
in a
inspect
sense,
for
they're
that.
doing the inspections to verify that
That's,
what the engineer certified to be okay
yes,
was built as proposed.
right. That's why I bring that up.
Yeah.
It should be just one, to me, it just seems, should be under one thing. Engineering hour rate would be your inspection costs, would all be in that group.
I
Okay.
don't know the detail to that, but your point's well taken in that. regard. But mostly what we were wanting to be sure is that inspection was covered.
Right, the inspection. Okay,
Construction.
thank you.
It would change if we were to hire somebody in-house that has that training and services and we're paying for that service to be done. But right now, we're billed by how much time it takes the other
Right.
group to do that. And sometimes it's easier than others, and so it's quicker than others. It's not a standard fee right now on those hourly. And I will say that in our current schedule, uniform fee schedule, it has portions in there about and cost per for planning or these other services are listed in there. But this is more in depth and also covering things that have been left out of the process and then the city's left foot in the bill.
I was just trying to see if there's a way that it could be put in there, so that way it's more transparent to the person submitting. People to have work done, like new construction. Once they know what the costs are gonna be.
You got to get on the mic first.
Yeah, that was the intention, is to try to cover all those expenses. But I know that even with the COGS fees, they change depending on who's reviewing the application.
Yes, if it requires a senior planner versus an associate planner, there's a different fee in our process with that. And it used to be that some cities allow, okay, the first so many minutes of a review are covered by the city, and then after that, you're paying the rate. It is a quirk of us being a small city that doesn't have the staff to do all these things alone. And honestly, it's the nature of why we have a cog. So throughout all of the state of Oregon, there are council of governments that help their regions. And matter of fact, you could even contract with one outside of your region. But each city can't have a planner necessarily or all these different things. And so the cogs hire that staff. And instead of us paying for a full-time employee that's not busy all the time, we just, as we need them, pay for their services. We have some big things coming up though, and you know, honestly, I've been a part of some conversations to help the COG have more employees to be able to help for all of us. Because again, the cost to a city to have that employee sitting there between projects doesn't make sense versus we're going to pay them as we need them. And that sometimes impacts the cost. If we are trying in the recommended fees to cover, but there's a couple things that are unknown, and that's the engineering piece and some of those specifics.
Were there any additional questions? No.
So before you go on, I'm gonna find my other document here real quick. Let's see. I'm having fun here, doing it all by myself tonight. Okay, so, technically, after the presentation of the fee analysis and the review chart, the recommendations that were there before you, you have that on a separate sheet too. That was kind of, it's the chart, try to make easier to read is what that recommended fee is. But after that is resolution 25R24, which would be amending the uniform fee schedule and land use application. My hope with this is that we would add this into our uniform fee schedule, and anything land use related, we would replace in the uniform fee schedule with the charts there. The council has the choice of the minimum or the recommended. Obviously, we're recommending the recommended fees for these to cover the cost. Otherwise, we have to figure out how to cover the expenses and how that process happens, but it is a council decision. The resolution before you, I would ask with your motion, if you want to adopt the resolution, to make the motion to adopt the resolution with the recommended or adopt the motion with the minimum recommend. So that's up to council.
Questions from the council?
Could we look at that road chart a little more?
This
The
chart,
Graph
the graph.
with the averages.
Well, and the other thing I would say about this with these averages, so this one doesn't have. This is the permits of the averages compared to Gold Hill, is that correct? The other one is the one that had the cities.
Yeah, this one here with the. that one.
Oh, no, that's what I had up a
That's what
second
you
ago.
have. That's the only other thing that we have.
This is the one
Yeah.
that has the other cities.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
that one
that's-
there. Yeah, that's.
So-
That's what I'm looking at.
But what this doesn't also take into consideration, Rogue River city manager is a planner. And they do their own building permits. They don't have to contract out with a second party to do that. Cave Junction has some of it contracted out, Jacksonville, Shady Cove, each of them have, like Talent and Phoenix, each have different levels of staff. And so there's a difference of what you charge when you're contracting out versus what you have in-house, because you're either paying for it through somebody else or your own personnel and stuff. So it is the smallest of the communities in our region as a comparison. So you'll notice Ashland isn't there because that's just big. And, but each of us, I don't know, does any other town, have no planning staff like us? Or do you do, that's Shady Cove, right?
We're no longer contracted with Shady Cove. I think we're
Okay.
contracted with someone else.
Got it.
I have a question. So what would you recommend for the city of Gold Hill? What fees would you recommend at this?
And that's the ones that I've recommended are in that chart and also on the recommended fee schedule. And regarding Rogue River, I'm doing an analysis for them at this time and they're going to be increasing their fees as well.
So if you look at the chart with the squares, the top one is our current fee. If there's not one there, it's because we're not charging it. The minimum, the mid one is the minimum that we need to cover it, but it might have to be up if there's additional time to take it. So the recommended is what RVCOG is recommending. So the third one in the box is the recommended fee schedule that RVCOG is recommending the city adopts.
And I noticed those were slightly higher than what the average was on that bar graph. Is that correct?
They should be comparable with what the average is. And I think some of them are still below the average.
Counselors, if you would, I'll entertain a motion right now.
I got a question though.
If there is no more questions.
It's a stupid one, because I don't know much about stuff like this, so I'm sure you guys are gonna go, oh, brother. But on section 3, type 1, number A, where it says $75 zoning clearance for shed deck fence. Is there a size limit on, like, for instance, the shed? I mean, if somebody goes down and gets a 10 by 10 shed from Lowe's, do they need a permit to put it in their backyard? Or add on to their deck? Like,
Typically, all structures would require a zoning clearance or a permit, so we could verify setbacks and different requirements. Yeah, it may be exempt from building permit.
if you wanna go down and buy one of those 10 by 10 sheds, you need to come to the city and say.
Confirm that you're meeting setback.
Most cities have a 200 square foot.
That's a
minimum.
building permit. That's different than a zoning clearance.
But for sheds, you don't. well,
So this isn't a building permit. A zoning clearance is to make sure that your structure is not in the city's right of way. That it's where it needs to be in the setbacks and if it's a fence, is it the front side of this property, the side property, or the back side? So then the height is impacted there. So there's different things to review. Again, planning, which most of this is planning, is what are you allowed to do on your property per the code? Now, we'd love it to be that you can do whatever you want on your property, but unfortunately, when you live close to other people, you might not appreciate what your neighbor's doing with their freedoms on their property, so therefore we have a code that puts the standardization of what we're supposed to do. And so this is what the planning Title 17 of our code essentially is what are you allowed to do on your property? So if you are putting something in, it is making sure is the setbacks. I'll give you an example. I had a meeting today with Fire District 3 and we were looking at areas of fuel reduction in our town. And there is a right of way for a street of the city that we haven't put through, but somebody has built a carport in the middle of the city's right of way. That structure per our code has to come down. And, you know, it's one of those things that there's other circumstances like that. They're like, okay, this was designed, there's a process involved, and we just want to make sure, the whole point is you're consistent, you're fair, and you follow the code so that the same standard applies to everybody for the sake of peace,
Safety.
So-
safety too, yeah.
Yeah, kind of clarify I'm still not clear. So if they wanted to do a 10 by 10, go down and buy a 10 by 10 shed. They would have to pay a $75 zoning clearance permit. Is that right?
Yes. And you could make recommendations. There could be size limitations. The current code or the fees are charged based on value of the project.
Right.
Get closer to that mic, please.
If there's other like overlays, we would verify, like for instance, flood, steep slopes, different. It's not just setbacks that we're looking at. We're just confirming that you're meeting all the development standards.
For instance, there's also a part of our code that limits how much of your property has a structure on it. You can only develop so much of your property. You're not allowed to have cement from corner to corner and in between that roof and all that. So there's a portion of your property that can be developed and the other portion has to remain kind of natural or landscaped or something like that.
But that would be for permanent structure. We're talking.
Yes, it would
temporary
have to have a foundation.
Yes, and so we're talking
No.
temporary structures.
No,
If it has a foundation, that's a permanent
Permanent
structure.
so
That's not a shed.
I would have to look at your definition, but typically, land use doesn't distinguish between temporary or permanent based on what
the coverage versus that.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to table this until we have. Oh, sorry.
Now, if we pass this, does that mean that everybody out here in our community who's built something on their land or have something on their property that's not right? Or we're gonna get in trouble? Or is it from this point on?
This is fees moving forward.
So my question, we need we need a motion either to go with the minimum recommendation or the recommended. Minimum or the recommended.
The recommended was based on analyzing what work comes through and what we're being charged for and what things are, the type of work that comes through the city. And the minimum I'll let you describe the difference between the minimum and recommended, but.
Minimum recommendation and the recommended.
Yeah, the minimum would hopefully cover all of the costs associated with the review of the application. That includes the planner's expenses as well as any meetings, notice. Because there's different levels of review that have required different approvals. And so I tried to encompass all that, and that way you could hopefully not charge the applicant additional fees at the end. But there is, it does address additional fees. And if you chose the minimum, then the city would have to charge or send an invoice after the application has been approved. And that's what I was trying to.
Generally,
avoid with
we
the-
want the fees collected when the approval happens for the sake of. Well, you can't go back and get it always afterwards. That's really problematic. And I'll give you an example. We recently went by a property that they put up a structure and it's in the city's right of way. It's not that shed, that's a separate one. But it's a small thing that they would say, I don't need a building permit for that. Okay, but it doesn't meet the setbacks. And that's why you want to make sure that we're meeting those setbacks, because they put expense in to have footings underneath this temporary thing. It's small, but it's still going to be in the city's right of way in two directions. And so there is review that needs to be happen and in that process. So
So you're saying the minimum doesn't cover our expenses, is that
There's a
right?
chance that it may not.
Right.
So,
If there's additional charges, then the minimum would not cover it.
but if we go with the recommended fee, then it's likely to cover all of our
Yes.
expenses. I think you.
Also, I have another question. I'm assuming this does not pertain to the replacement of a deck or a fence or anything like that. If it's
Typically,
not being moved or
if
anything,
it
but
doesn't
the
change
floors
the
is just being
footprint,
changed.
if it's not changing the footprint or the size, it should just be a replacement and not necessarily be an issue.
a lot of times that's under the city's policy, whether like for likes would require a review or not.
And I think it's a good thing to look at that's, the fees are separate from what the types. So this is a fee to cover a type. And those are examples that are there right now. However, if you want the code to be changed on what those things are, that's a separate review that we're going to have further talk about that as well. And those are things that would go through the planning commission and necessarily to the council.
Converts again, just to clarify, there are some, you mentioned decks, if they're less than 30 inches high, they often are exempt from building permit requirements. And so therefore, it's just an allowed use, and especially if you're doing a replacement and it's not anything that's going to have a structural question to it. So they tend to be pretty easy.
But if you're saying that, then a shed under a certain amount of square footage would also be just a temporary use saying.
But it's still a new use. And that new
Yes,
use,
new.
and it's got height. That's the issue there. It has height. most of the exemptions talk about something under 30 inches.
And most of the time an HOA would cover things like that, not a city entity. Things like that.
HOAs are a whole other game. They have the authority to be more restricted than the city, but not less restricted. So there's still an evaluation that the city has to do.
Any other questions? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until we have a chance to further review it to get clarification of what we want to define as temporary structure, permanent structure. So that way, if a person comes in and gets a 5x5 shed, Home Depot or someplace, they want to have a little garden tool shed in their property. They don't have to come down and pay $75 to get a review. It doesn't make any sense. You're adding cost to people that is unnecessary.
For a second on this,
I second that.
any other question? All right, I have a motion, I have a second. Roll call.
Counselor Bescheid. No. Counselor Bergren,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
Yes.
Counselor Martin. Counselor Stancliff.
Yes.
I know you voted for it. You didn't say a time to table to, so it's just indefinitely, correct? Okay,
I said table it until we have an opportunity to look into it further as a work session.
okay, so next up on the presentation from RV Cog is the Scrivener's error, so I will let you describe that. I'll pull some stuff up for you here. Let me know what you want on the screen.
If they have the list of Scrivener's errors, that's all we need.
I
This
will
evening.
pull that up. So,
It's in the city council discussion items. Again, I'm Dick Converse. I
here we
actually
go.
worked for the Rogue Valley Council of Governments from 1997 to 2019. Part of my duties involved working with the city of Gold Hill. So this is a familiar room to me, and it's much different than when I was here, but it's the same room. It's good to be back. Retirement has its great blessings, but sometimes in December and January, I get a little restless. I was contacted by Lily regarding some issues, and then it turns out that the So Ready received some money to help the region with regard to affordable housing, improving the ability for people to move forward with projects and looking at impediments to development, all of those kinds of things. It's quite an extensive project. I've just been doing it since January, but it's been very interesting. One of the first things I did, though, was because my history is with planning, was to go through the city's development codes to see how they conformed to this new bill. One of the things that James Shireman worked with you on was to include duplexes in residential zones. That's a requirement. But for example, I went through each code to see if the city was allowing that. Most do. But as I looked at the code, I was coming across issues that weren't making a lot of sense. One of the biggest ones was, for example, your R3 zone does not allow anything smaller than a triplex. It doesn't allow duplexes or single family dwellings. And yet there were about 6 references to single family dwellings left in the R3 zone. So a Scrivener error situation is going through, realizing that the intent of the ordinance was this, but we've got some language in here that needs to be cleaned up. And that's the whole intent of these. There are several codes that were adopted previously, as far back as 2005, on erosion and sediment control, low impact development, private streets. Those are already adopted by the city, but they have never made it into the code. So there is a provision of just plugging those in. They're already adopted, nothing more the city has to do except to incorporate them. There are issues with setbacks. There was a provision that said you can go 1/3 of the way into the setback. We were talking about setbacks earlier. Most communities will put an actual number. And so we're saying you can go 3 feet into the setback in that code, it says, but not, you can't be closer than 3 feet to the property line. So even with that exception, you can't go to the property line. And that was something that needed to be clarified. And in the non-conforming use section, there's one part that talks about if you want to change things, you go through a conditional use permit. Another thing says you go through a variance. Well, it's one or the other. And I was checking other codes and they typically do it as a conditional use. So we're just suggesting that that process be the one that's used. Again, I mentioned removing duplexes and manufactured dwellings from the R3 zone. One thing that's changed since I retired was the treatment of manufactured homes. It used to be, we had these like 7 rules that you had to have. It had to be 1,000 square feet. And some of the design things had to really resemble single family dwellings. The legislature came through and completely gutted that, changed the rule. When James put the code together, he has a provision that has those new standards in it, but the individual zone still had the old. So we need to replace them. It's just cleaning up what we're doing there. There are some things that will move into further review. For example, in Gold Hill, home occupations are really limited. They're allowed only if nobody knows the business is going. There are some communities that allow something as a conditional use permit or a further public review. You're going to have customers, you may have a few of 1 or 2 employees from off-site. That's when you get into the conditional use. We don't have that. We just have the outright permitted, so it doesn't need to have a conditional use at this point. But the city could consider adding that as we look through this further review. And there's several hyperlinks missing. There's a gap here. It's like somebody's swearing. It doesn't have the actual word that we're looking for. So those are the kind of fixes we do in Scrivener's Error. So that's the list we have. We would suggest you just go ahead and authorize us to make those corrections.
So to clarify, you're looking for a motion to give permission to fix the Scrivener errors.
Right. You have that?
It's not in a form, it's just, this was one I was questioning if you needed an official form for, so a simple motion authorizing to move forward with making the Scrivener error corrections is appropriate tonight.
I'll make a motion to authorize RBCOG to correct Scrivener's errors.
Motion and a second, roll call.
Counselor Beachhead,
Yes.
Counselor Berggren,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
Yes.
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stancliff,
Yes.
motion carries. All right.
Thank you. Actually, one of the things that I forgot to mention is that in this review we're doing, it's trying to reduce, I mentioned removing barriers to develop. But one of the biggest development barriers is understanding the code. And if you've got contradictory information in there, which one is correct? So that was the agenda. Now moving on to previously initiated by City Council and even recommended text amendments. These are actions that will require more work because there has been an intent expressed maybe, and in case several of these are ideas that you have already brought forward, where it talks about them previously initiated by the council. And a couple of them have to do with the development standards and architectural standards. The way the code is written, those are required for multifamily dwelling, public buildings, things like that, but they do not apply to single family dwellings. And so what this would do is bring some of those, at least some of those standards in to play. If, for example, should all driveways be paved in new development? We also are looking at the mobile food vendor is almost to this, you could almost call it a Scrivener error, but there's more to it. And that is the fact that we have a temporary mobile food vendor, 72 hours. It actually goes through the full land use process, which is a 2-month process to get something approved for 72 hours. That's a use that's typically involved with the festival. The city or some approved entity is having an event in Gold Hill. This just gives the opportunity for somebody to have a food cart There is still a need for a business license, but there's not a need for land use review. We do have the land use review when people have pods of, where they have a, what we call a semi-permanent truck, food truck. That requires review. We need to make sure that circulation and works for that, and that all sanitation requirements have been met.
So I'm
That's-
gonna jump in real quick on
Sure.
that one. So in your packet, you're gonna see Council Order 25 CO1. And with our charter update that we had, that the voters approved in November, it now has a land use process for an order. And, as we were looking into bringing additional code recommendations to you, I realized I wanted to bring this one back to you as well. So council, you adopted this first one, CO1, in a motion last month. But in order to kind of formalize it and codify, so I can look and say, what were those things that we authorized to do? I'm putting it in a council order. So you voted on this at our last meeting. But I'm putting it in a council order. And part of that was because right after it are recommendations for additional changes. And so putting that in an order. So you're going to see them both in the same format this way. So, and I don't know if you would like to present on the ones that still need to happen. So the CO1 you approved last month in a motion. I'm asking that we adopt the order that formalizes that. And then CO2 is ones that in the review of our code, we believe would have to take a higher level of review. And so those are before you on the in the packet as well under the CO2.
And the
Right.
CO, you have that in front of you there. The CO2 include the paved driveways and aprons. And right now it says encourage, we would move it to a required, and that is moving the land use evaluation, saying we're upping the level of requirement. Encouraged is a non-land use term, because if they don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. Required it, no question.
So I just want to clarify, this is not the council deciding today that you
Correct.
want these things to happen.
Correct.
You are saying you want to initiate a process for the code of change. So there'll be recommendations that will be submitted to the state. It'll come back for public hearings through the planning commission. And the planning commission will vote and make recommendations that will then come back
Yeah.
to the council for adoption.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have
started to
mentioned
get really confused there.
This is just
Yeah.
authorizing.
That's why these are in this other
That's-
list,
okay,
because
perfect.
they do require public input
Yeah.
and
That's where I was.
deliberation among planning
My
commission
head was starting to
councilors.
spin there. I'm like.
Sorry about that.
So this is requesting this order, the CO2 order is requesting the council initiate text amendments process to go forward in these areas to look at based on code changes that we think should become before you, but it'll go through the full hearings and process and evaluations. It'll have public hearings for comment at the planning commission level as well as the council.
Property owners will receive notice if they're in one of the zones that would be affected by that, because it changes the uses that they would be allowed. So,
Yeah.
yeah, very much a long
and-
process.
Why I was starting to sit there trying to figure that out. We had worked on that. I was on the planning. commission for all the county. I'm going, some of this stuff going, some of this stuff going.
Yeah.
Was,
Yeah, again, that's where we want to be sure that what we come up with both reflects previous discussion, but ensures that that follows all the way through to full adoption, inclusion in the code. The home occupation situation is the one where I mentioned earlier, where we might want to look at the possibility of expanding the opportunity for home occupations. But with that, there are some concerns, because they can go be, they're kind of drift beyond what is approved and what's.
And
actually
just to
great.
be clear, if you don't know that home occupation doesn't mean you're living in your home. It means having a business in your home. So home occupation is a business operated out of a residence.
Operated by the owner. It's obviously full business. Property line adjustments, where you just want to change the line. We don't have that in Title 16 in the subdivision code. We have partitions and subdivisions. We don't have any provision for moving lines. I can take some blame for that, because I should have seen that back in the early 2000s. Then there's some question about pre-application conferences, consultations, meetings, conferences. We just want to make sure we have that all clear as to what level of review is occurring. But that would be added into the code. It would be some new text. Oddly enough, you're not allowed to have any more new public primary schools in Gold Hill. You can have kindergartens, you can have high schools, you can't have a primary. According to
Because
the
why?
code. It's not in the code.
Huh.
It's missing from the code. So that needs to be added in and it's gone. It's not there. So to put it back in, we actually have to do a code amendment. That one kind of startled me when I came across that one. And then the last one is just, there are zones that allow churches, and there was this big federal RULIPA, it's religious land use and something else. In incarcerated people, it's like churches and prisons are kind of together. But what they were saying then is that if you allow clubs, lodges, and fraternal organizations, you also have to allow churches. This is sort of the flip side of it. We're allowing churches, but similar uses are not allowed. So consideration of whether those should be considered. That'll just be part of the discussion. You may decide we don't need it, but right now they're not on a par with churches. So those are the kinds of things we. Thank you for the clarification. These are not things we're asking you to approve tonight.
So this is just a summary of
Yes.
the
And,
actions.
and
So-
actually, one thing that happens sometimes when you're looking at something like this, something else pops up. Well, we're to notify the state of the things that we know we're wanting to talk about. But the way it works is at the end of the process, if you have modified, taken some things out or even added some things, you just let the state know at that point. These changes are in addition to what they had received notice. So it's just full disclosure. And that tends to work pretty well. So it may expand, but these are what we've identified.
So before you is Council Order 25CO-1, which is the items that you approved us to move forward with via a motion last month. This is just formalizing that, codifying that. And then separately is Council Order 25CO2, which are the new items that Mr. Converse helped us identify that we have some inconsistencies in our code that we should address. So yeah, so we would be looking for a motion to adopt the order 25 CO-1 and then a separate motion for this, the two.
I'll make a motion to adopt Council Order 25-CO-1.
Any other questions? Right, I have a motion and I have a second. Roll call.
Counselor Beachhead,
Yes.
Counselor Berggren,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
Yes,
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stankliff,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, now for order 25-CO2, I would entertain a motion at this time. How would I do it for the clarification?
No, these are the new items. So the
Okay.
CO1 was items previously approved, just codifying it.
Right.
CO2 is the items that were new that were just presented that also should be initiated.
This-
This
and
is
this-
initiating the process.
Initiating the process for clarification. Okay,
So I'll make a motion to approve Council Order 25CO-2.
Second.
any other questions? All right, I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Counselor Beachhead,
Yes.
Counselor Berggren,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
yes,
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stankliff,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay,
I just want to thank you both
Yeah.
for your work on this
Thank
and
you.
we'll be back.
Thank you.
Just the clarification with the opportunity for a workshop. We can coordinate a schedule.
We'll probably do that on Tuesday, the 15th. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
moving on along here with council considerations. We have resolution 25-R-21, creating park fund. Lily?
Thank you. So we're getting ready to go into budget season and generally speaking, if you have an area that you have a designated funding source for, you should have a designated special fund in your budget. Well, so far, our parks fund has been in the general fund alone. But the streets fund has a $3 fee on our water bill. The stormwater has that and the parks have that, but the parks doesn't have its own fund. I am moving our budget towards that this year. What was different this last budget session is that all personnel were paid out of the general fund. And instead of it being office and parks, that doesn't really cover it. this next budget session, you will see that it'll be office and field. And then, so what we're doing tonight is creating a special fund. That's the Parks Fund. So it will have its own Fund 15 will be the Parks Fund in the upcoming budget session. But that way you can also see the designated revenues and expenses related to parks. And it's not a big fund yet. You know, we don't bring in a lot of revenue there, but the goal is that we will be applying for more grants and different things that will be some revenue. And you'll be able to see the expenses related to parks, and technically anything over $5,000 requires a capital outlay in the budget, so it should be in those items. So it's got its own source of money, therefore should have its own fund, and that's what's before you is a resolution creating the Parks Fund.
So are we looking for a motion?
Correct.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion for resolution 25-21.
I'll make a motion to approve 25R-20.
Second that.
Any other questions? I have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Counselor Beachide,
Yes.
Counselor Bergeron,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
Yes.
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stancliff,
Yes.
motion carries.
Next, resolution 25-R-22, removing budget committee member.
Council, and I have a typo I will fix for you, that it has a R in resolution. I'm not sure what an e-solution is, but it's electronic solution for us tonight, yes. We have a budget committee member that was not able to take part last year and who has not responded to any communications this year. And so before you is a resolution for that member to be removed, and then we'll follow it with a resolution to appoint. We have applications in process, so it's pretty straightforward.
So at this time,
I'll make a motion to pass resolution 25-R-22. Want me to read the whole thing?
No,
a motion and a second. Roll call.
unless you want to, of course, read it.
Okay.
Okay. Counselor Beachide,
Yes.
Counselor Bergeron,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
Yes.
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stancliff,
Yes.
motion carries. State law, right before you now is resolution 25R-23. The state law states that budget committee members would serve for 3 years. As best I could tell, we have 3 members, Carol Holm, Mark Warwick, and Larry Holm, that have served 3 years. And are willing and able to serve longer on the budget committee. There's nothing in our code or anything that says there's a limit on how many consecutive sessions they would serve, just that they should be reappointed. In addition, with the vacancy just created by the last resolution, we have a new applicant, Cindy Klaus. I apologize, I neglected to put it in the pamphlet, but the redacted application is in front of you. And we'll make sure that is kept with the council packet after this, but the resolution was there. She has expressed a willingness to serve as budget committee member. So I decided to, instead of doing 2 resolutions, put them all together. And that is what is before you here.
So that would bring us to 4 people.
No, we have other appointees. You appointed 2 a couple times ago. So we have members that are midterm. We have members that were appointed at the last meeting, 2 members, and so this will bring us full.
Need a motion?
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to pass resolution 25-R-23.
Questions? I have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Counselor Beachide,
Yes.
Counselor Bergeron,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
Yes.
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stancliff.
Yes.
Motion carries. Well, council, this last resolution's a doozy.
Mhm.
I don't know how else to say it, that I don't know how to spell it, but that is the technical one. So, we spent some time trying to track down. Well, to be blunt, we've been spending some time with our active budget or billing, utility billing, to start collecting outstanding balances. And as of today, there's nobody that is not on a payment plan that has a balance over 60 days. We have, with the help of our staff, actively gone after collecting and enforcing the costs of utility billing. It's been a huge task that since November, when Mallory has taken over utility billing, that our outstanding balance went from 36,000 to about 17,000 in outstanding bills that have not been paid. And we have done this via giving shut-off notices and trying to be intentional. First, it was no payments in over 60 days, then it's a balance over 60 days. Every person who's come to us with a request to do a payment plan, we have worked with everybody. And our goal is not to be punitive, is not for people to have their water shut off. Our goal is to be good stewards of what we've had. And it's the contract that we have with the community that we're providing you water, you have to pay for that water. Otherwise, we don't have the ability to operate. So in this process, we've been dealing with the active accounts. We have found over $27,000 of balance on inactive accounts. So we have gone down the path of how can we deal with those? I am going to be bringing to you at our next meeting an ordinance that is going to change our code regarding utility billing so that we could lien a property for an unpaid balance. Most all communities have that ability, but it's not in our code for the utility billing. It's in our code for code enforcement, but it's not in our code for utility billing. So we've been trying to track down what's happened, and I want to show you another document here. Let's see.
How much did you say we have in non-collectible?
Over 27,000,
Over 20.
which is a very curious number to me because you might recall that when I've been down this path of how much money do we need to pay Rogue Valley Sewer System, in part of the annexation was that any of the revenues we had in any of our accounts, the sewer account, the sewer reserve, and all that, that we would give them the revenues we've collected from utility billing when we signed the annexation agreement in that process. It took us some time to figure out that amount, and that money was transferred at the beginning of this fiscal year. But there was an amount showing on our trial balances of about a $27,000 outstanding revenue, and we can't figure out where it came from. The best we could tell is when we converted from the old system to this new utility billing, it came with a, hey, these are outstanding bills, and it was just listed there. But what we found out now, we've been trying to track down, okay, how would we deal with this? How would we write this off? How would we, and it turns out there was a report and a list from June 4th of 2020 that a previous city manager sent to Vision. And I am hesitant to put it actually up on the screen because it does have some addresses and some names, and I don't necessarily want to put anybody in that spotlight, but account status is a column on this report. And some of them say active and some of them say delete. So apparently the old city manager, when they were switching from Springbrook to the new system, found they had some duplicative accounts and some other things that for whatever reason they said, delete these out. And they sent the whole list and they didn't get deleted. They were created as inactives. And so as far as we can tell, that's the gist of these. But in our system, they don't have a service address. They don't have a billing history. They don't have a meter. So I cannot legally go after them and say, you owe this money, because how could I testify in court that I can swear that that's a good bill? It came from an old system I don't have access to. The best I can do is that Vision, our current financial software, kept everything the city sent to them and found this report. And it has this thing that's saying, like, just in the first 5 accounts, 3 are active and 4, or, sorry, 2 are active and 3 say delete, but they didn't get deleted. They got built into our system. And from what we can tell is they didn't want to lose the history, so they said, we'll just make them inactive. But it kept them having a balance, and there are some duplicatives in there that it shows the billing is in there and it's in there in our current system. So to say the least, before I did anything about the resolution, I called Carl at RVSS. I said, Carl, how our system currently works is when somebody has an outstanding balance and they make a payment, it pays the oldest bill first. So we still have bills that are coming in that are paying sewer bills that were billed under the city's purview before the annexation. And they go automatically when that bill's paid, they go into the sewer fund. So I am running a report of all the deposits that have been made into that sewer fund. And we're going to be transferring that money to RVSS because it's money that should have gone to them. Well, this is money I can't collect. It's uncollectible. And, anyhow, so at this point, it could impact what it shows that would be owed to them in those bottom lines. But he agreed it's not something we can go after. And so the best course is I said, I'll take it to my council for the authorization to write off these balances that I could not swear in court that we can collect. And, anyhow, the best I can tell is these were in the old Springbrook system. Some of them show dates back in the 2016, 2017. Sadly, there are a couple that show from 2024. A lot of them say 2020, but it's hard to say because it says they were created at a day. It looks like it's the conversion date, but the data was from 16 and 17, so it doesn't quite match. But either way, how do you go after something if you can't attest that it's accurate? Where I can show this was their consumption, here was the bill, here was the lack of payment, here was the service address, here was the name associated with that. And add to that, we don't have an agreement with property owners in our current system that they are responsible for the bill. Only that if they have a tenant, they're supposed to sign the application. And so that's a separate issue that otherwise you should have seen this just get leaned on the property if somebody left and didn't pay the bill. But the city wasn't doing that because that's not in the code. So I'm stuck with this amount that we can't go after, but I need the council's authorization to write off. And so what it is that this is authorizing staff to write off the inactive and unbillable accounts with outstanding balances that's been presented, that they have to meet the criteria, the inactive, lacking the service address or the names or the meter information, and deemed uncollectible due to the reasons stated above. We will maintain a record of all of these so you can see exactly what has done for the reference purposes. And we would be working with our software that will give them the list of the accounts, and they can just add the note to the account as the Y. And so it will be documented in there. And we don't close accounts. They just go from active to inactive. So they will stay in the system. But it will clear up that there's no way there's not a means for us to do this.
Do we have a number of how many accounts that is that we're gonna do? Are we gonna do 10 or is it 15 or is it 25?
It was about 5 pages. But again, some of these that we found from this list that we got from Vision shows that some of it's duplicative. So there's still active accounts there. I mean, some of them that we had names and no addresses, I recognize the names. It doesn't mean that I can attest to when was that billed and how, well, how do you know I have to pay that? Oh gosh, I have no documentation to back it, so I can't. So lawfully, how can I present to you guys that I'm going to go after people that I mean, when I would send somebody to collections, I'm attesting and notarizing that this is a true bill and I can go after it for that person. I can't with these. Rick, I can't, you declare your conflict now. No, I'm just kidding.
So I just want to, for my own satisfaction here. This is just giving you the power to go through it. And you're gonna make the decision on what is. valid,
I'm gonna
what is-
follow the policy the council's
I
authorizing.
know, but what I'm saying is, and that's that's how I'm reading this whole thing.
Yeah.
I've already,
Yeah, that
So,
if
does
it
that
meets
make
that
sense?
criteria, that it can be then written off.
we don't, you really don't want that obligation. And she's done such a great, and this is just my recommendation. Done such a great job doing what she's doing now. So I would say, I would entertain a motion to pass this resolution 25-R-25. Any questions on that? Okay.
Now you know why I called it a doozy.
I'll make a motion to pass resolution number 25-R-25.
Second.
No questions?
Needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah. Roll call,
What we
please.
can do with it.
Counselor Beachhead.
Yes.
I heard a wait, I'm sorry.
It's dead weight.
Thank you. Counselor Bergeron,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
Yes.
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stancliff,
Yes.
motion carries.
Good job.
One clean book.
Yeah, we want that cleaned up.
Okay, number 7, consent agenda. This is for the minutes from previous meetings. March 11th, 2025.
I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any other questions? I have a motion and a second. Roll call.
I'm sorry, I missed who made the second. Thank you. All right, so Counselor Beachhead,
Yes.
Counselor Bergeron,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier,
Yes.
Counselor Martin, Counselor Stancliff,
Yes.
motion carries.
Reports from counselors. Well, I have a report from RB Cog, the meeting that we had. And we sat through. Access and RB Cog have a situation going on right now that they're talking about losing their kitchen. RB Cog is, and so that is something they prepare 1,400 meals. throughout the community. And so just keep that in mind.
That's the.
Yes, that's the Food and Friends that RB Cog, Access. I don't really understand. I know them and Access are having an issue. And so I hope they reach a decision shortly, but that's about as far as I can go with it. I did, however, Pauline is talk with the state and they will jump on that bandwagon right now. National Guard, they have a facility there. Kitchen's not being used, all state of the art, and it's big enough for what they need it for. I left her a message. She never got back with me, but I'm just gonna put it in your court. No, I'll reach out to her again. I just haven't had the time. So anyway, that's all I have.
I'll just make a report on Can Do, just nobody from Can Do got up and spoke about Can Do exactly tonight, but lots going on there. We're really gearing up for Gold Dust Days, and it's gonna be really big. It's gonna be really, really great. So,
One of the better ones yet.
yep, best yet. Best yet.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you mean the cleanup day?
May.
Yeah, in May. I got it on my phone, but
It,
yeah.
it came out on Facebook today and
On
social
Facebook.
media. Yes, that's out.
Yeah, it's getting lots of. Yeah, so there's cleanup day and then yarding in the hill too, before Gold
Mm.
Dust Day, yeah. those
Hold on,
times that the-
just to clarify, let's do that part on good of the order. Just because this is counselor reports of,
Yes. Reports from councilors,
that,
okay.
yeah.
And
Any other reports?
there was no planning, commission, so.
City manager reports.
I'm surprised none of you mentioned that you hosted a meeting with the League of Oregon Cities, Small Cities.
I did.
Or that we held a council retreat here in this room with goal setting, and man, you guys pulled like a year's worth of work in 1 week. So I just want to commend you guys for volunteers. It's a lot. I mean, we just dealt with our 25th resolution tonight. Thank you, council. We're getting things done. But okay, so that put us to city manager's report. So yes, you will notice that just as a heads up, most everybody should have noticed that they are going to be closing the bridge from 6 PM tonight to 6 AM for some work and prep of the future road replacement. I just got notification this week from Adkins that they don't think that they are the best equipped to help us. If we move forward with wanting to put a sleeve or brackets on the bridge so that if we ever expand water across the bridge, it's already there. So we can try to prepare and save money by doing it now versus cost in the future. So I've reached out at Adkins' recommendation to the engineer that is working with RVSS, who's already coordinated that with them. And we'll be seeing, but that's an expense we don't have budgeted necessarily. I do believe it's an important one that we go forward with, but I wanted to give you a heads up. So I have kind of a printed report in front of you, just some updates, but then I also want you to see another thing there. So kind of some project updates. So I will give you a heads up that the money that we got from the state, that is Senate Bill 1530 funding, and Business Oregon is overseeing. The costs that have come in to do stuff means that we're over the money allotted. And so I am having to prioritize which project do we see to completion. And one of the biggest things that we're going to see soon. So the second item on the project grant update is that the draft of the water rate study has been received. We're waiting for the system development charge SEC draft soon. Once that's done, we'll have Adkins come in and present to you guys the outcome of that grant in the report. But preliminarily, we're costing at least $40,000 more than we're bringing in revenue. I have to find a way to reduce operations costs. And one of the ways to do that is to upgrade the outdated and not working controls at the plant. So the two biggest items that we were trying to accomplish with the money from the state were replacing the main water line between first and second, and upgrading the controls and such at the water plant. At this point, I am working with the state that we are about done with the design portion of the water line. I've asked, I'm going to have an environmental review done so that we can put that water line into funding requests through another source down the road. I have to get the controls at the plant done. One of the pieces of this is the third or fourth time it's been bid by our electrician and such, and they said they won't do it again. If we don't do this now, essentially, we're starting from scratch and we can't. We have to get these parts in, upgraded. They've been working as a team. They had a planning meeting to get it. They have to keep the plant up and running while they're getting the new system there. And then we have to shut down for 5 days, and it has to be at a time that we have enough water in the reservoir. We've never shut down for 5 days. It's a big deal. As part of it, I have to run gas to the plant. So we've been working with getting the cost of that. So we have a meeting coming up to kind of determine that next step, and I have to work with the state to see if we have to amend the contract to both projects were in there, but it means the water line isn't going to be completed. The design will be completed. But as part of the third line item, the CDBG grant that we got, we're going into that phase. We had the kickoff meeting, and the things they have to do because it's federal funding is we have to have a grant administrator that's not in-house or they won't reimburse. RVCOG has agreed to be our grant administrator. And I've signed an IGA for that. And it's covered by the cost of the grant. Additionally, an environmental review has to be done. RVCOG is going to do that environmental review. The same scope of doing the water line replacement of Fourth Street, which is under the CDBG, is the same purview of the First Street one. So RVCOG, I've asked if they will do the environmental review as they're doing the one that they'll also do the other. Because it should be nominal in a difference. And I believe it's worth us paying that difference. So those are done. So that will make sure that once we can get the next funding stage, the design is done, the environmental review is done, we go to bid and we get the projects done. But the biggest impact I can say that we need on our community is reducing operations costs, which means I have to prioritize which one that I do so we stay in budget. And that means that we're going to do the controls at the water plant, because if we can lower our operations costs that right now are upwards, getting close to $15,000 a month, we're not bringing in that revenue to cover our operations. We have to lower those operational costs. And if we can have efficiencies in our controls, we can lower our operational costs to get other things accomplished and not just be in emergency mode. So there's been a lot going on with those. And they're big grants. It's a big deal. A lot of things that haven't been done for a lot of years, and we're trying to tackle as much as we can. I will tell you something little that we got done. So I don't know if you know that all the work that's done in City Park with watering last summer was our staff going down and manually turning on the sprinklers because we don't have timers. Well, we now have timers in that park. So City Park has, the little one by the library has timers now. So that frees up staff to do something else. I signed a contract with the same irrigation company that helped us install that we're getting the locates done in the sports park so that we can get the valves replaced in the sports park so that before this spring is in full swing, we will have timers working in the sports park. So we will actually, hopefully, fingers crossed that we get it all done. We'll have watering all summer in zones so we can actually water the grass, keep the weeds down, keep the grass green, the fire risk down. So I'm excited about that.
Question. Is that gonna be from irrigation?
Not yet.
No, okay, so it'll be treated water.
This is just getting our system working. The cost of getting the irrigation from the river, there's more entailed there. So my hope is that when we draw the irrigation water, that we got the water right for, and we've made it through that process. We have to work with ODF&W about what they'll allow for the screen and the pump. And then there's the measurement of where do we bring it up? Does it get buried? Then you have other issues that you have to do, or there's a lot of details there. And then it's a matter of, my goal, my heart is to partner with the Little League so that all of the sports park is watered by that irrigation water that close to the river, that we don't have treated water going back to the river, but it's a long way to run it. So we're trying to look at our options for that, of what would be the least costly of how do we get the water there. But it was going to be more than any grant could be done right now. And that's why we switched on the four-way foundation from the irrigation to the park safety with the fence and the gates. But I'm still not giving up on that. We're just trying to get a plan so then we can go after the funding for that. But for now, we're just trying to get the sprinkler system to work. Then we'll work in the next phase in getting the irrigation water to do it versus treated water. So I don't know if you've noticed, we maybe have gotten a little bit of rain. And I should have put this in here. So 2 storms so far this winter, I've had to call staff out after hours and getting things done with trees coming down, with blocking streets, clearing out the culverts and the roadway from the water runoff. They were filling sandbags and helping people with that. And so this last storm on a Sunday, they came out, I called them out by 8 a.m. and they spent hours trying to keep everything going so the water's moving. But we have a significant issue with one of the city's storm drains, and as far as I can tell is, I want to say it was 1933. I don't think it was 23. I think it's 1933 that they said the brick tunnels were created. But all the water off of Fourth and uphill comes down and to Fredenberg and goes underneath Swede, and it's supposed to go down a pipe all the way to the river. That pipe is crushed all the way to the river, and it stops at the sidewalk on the north side of the road. At some point, we've been able to determine the city put a second inlet on the other side of the street with a cement pipe that goes all the way to the road. They're not at the same elevation though. And I don't know, and as far as we can tell, there's only one inlet just down the sidewalk on Swede's property. We also found that, so basically it gets to the street and it fills up our, manhole, the little cavern there. And then it builds up pressure, and then it pressurizes back up and it floods their building. This last one, it took them 7 employees 2 hours to get the water out of their building. Now, at the same time, in their back lot, they were pumping down around to try to keep it from going that route. They put a pump in our storm drain, rounded it to another storm catch, inlet. And the water on the back end of their property went down. So the water's getting through underneath, even though we know that's crushed underneath their building, the water's getting through, but it stops at the street. And interestingly, there's a second line on the south end that goes east and west. So along the frontage of Second, there's a line that goes there. I have not been able to find on a map at which point it goes to the river. It could go east and west as far as we know, but right now there's inlets by Willie's and across the street that are the east-west. They're not connected with the ones right there that are going to the river. But there's enough water coming out from under the street that is leaking through a crack and going into that storm drain, but not enough to relieve the pressure on the other side of the road. So what it means is that crush is letting water through, it's leaking through the road and getting over there. That could compromise the street. So the water's getting through the building, even though it's not good. And there's on one side of the road, that's the one crushed to the street. But there's one just a few feet away. And this whole area is where the curb bump out is in front of Swedes on Second there, right at Fredenberg. So I had an excavator come out as we were trying to figure out how do we solve this, because Swedes is flooded 3 times this winter. And this is city's stormwater. So the recommendation, and Swedes is going to work with us, is on their property, kind of just inside of their inlet, we're going to put 1,000-gallon tank to cap off the stormwater coming from underneath the building and all of uphill, so that it doesn't keep going under the road. We're then in the second cavern of that 1,000. There's going to be a 2-cavern system. And the second one, we're going to pump over to the system that's not broke, that takes it all the way to the river. But it'll have a filter to catch stuff that we'll have to clean out. So it means I have to run electricity. I'm still waiting on the bid. But we believe this will be a more cost efficient and process than digging up from Second to the river to replace the one that's crushed all the way to the river. So what's that, 3 blocks to have to take a storm pipe versus 20 feet of running a line and doing that. So anyhow, the Swedes team, their owner, their operations manager, their whole executive team's been out there trying to find solutions and work with us, and they've been very gracious. So we are going to be trying to finally, I was told I'm the 6th city manager they've asked for help on this project, and they didn't talk to interims. And we're hopefully finally going to get this done. It's going to be an expense, but we have to do it. So I wanted you to be aware of that. That's the waiting on the bids for the stormwater block at Second and Fredenberg. I met with Fire District 3 today. So you know how we got in 2023 a 3-year community wildfire risk reduction grant. You've seen the little A-frame signs around town, encouraging people to scan the QR code and get information. So Fire District 3 hires some ODF crews in the wintertime to do fuels reduction. Then they go back to their other job in the summertime, but they're going to be here starting with us April 14th and work till fire season. And so met with them today and mapped out areas that we're going to be focused on, using the grant to do that, to reduce fuels. We're going to try to get some notices out to different ones working in the city's right of ways to clear up those areas, and hoping other people will reach out to Fire District 3 to also get some help on their properties as well. But that's exciting. We're not moving yet on the 2024 Community Wildfire Risk Reduction Grant we got from State Fire Marshal's office, because working with Fire District 3, Loma Katsi, Jackson Soil Water Conservation District, and Gold Hill, Fire District 3 has applied for a grant, a federal grant, CWDG. Last time they applied, and Loma Katsi, and neither got it. This time, we're all working together in one application. And they used Gold Hill as the center and with this 5-mile circle around it. And if they get that grant, we're gonna be tackling all of our fuels reductions. And if you'd like to see a map, it's in the hallway closest to the door down to the conference room on the left. So you'll see the circle that area is. But I've been asked to wait on the communal wildfire because we can use that as a match for the CWDG. So as soon as we hear, we'll get through that other one. But here's a chance to use state money to get a lot more federal money to hopefully get that through. And also we have applied for the Forward Foundation grant that you guys approved us to apply for. I also met with bond counsel. So USDA we've been at this a year trying to get the annexation and the completed the loan assumption move to RVSS. We've been jumping through all the hoops and reports and everything to do. USDA got back to us this last week advising there was something missed when the loan actually was taken in 2017. And so the city took a loan from the state. We have a Business Oregon loan, and we have a USDA federal loan that were both taken back in the day. Generally speaking, in language of the loans, they say who's got priority if something happens, who gets paid first. And it wasn't listed, and they're asking for that to be listed, which engaged the bond counsel. Now, granted, the state of Oregon has already transferred their loan to RVSS. We don't have that one anymore. We're just waiting on USDA. But they put our loan in default until this transfer is done, and they froze our federal grants, which is an issue. Our EQUEG grant that's dealing with our intake has been on hold because of this. So bond counsel is going to try to get all the information to them. And I reiterated with them that we need this done. We are down to one pump at the intake station. And so we need to get this project done, to get that stuff done. And so they understood that, and they're going to work to try to keep getting that done. Thursday, you know how we passed all those rules to try to have our risk assessment to be as good as possible. That is happening this Thursday. I have been attending some Department of Revenue budget on trainings online instead of traveling to Salem, trying to save us money. And I met one-on-one with ODOT about some potential highway projects in our area that we can try to get some state funding down here. As you know, we hosted the other two things. We do have some upcoming Parks and Recreation Committee on the 9th, Planning Commission on the 16th. And we're going to add to this list, which wasn't known earlier. We are going to do a meeting workshop on the 15th. So we'll be here at 6 o'clock on the 15th. And I got contacted today by the executive director of the League of Oregon Cities. She is coming down for a CIS benefits meeting in Jacksonville, but asked if she can come visit Gold Hill and get a tour of Gold Hill on June 24th. And she asked if any elected officials wanted to join. And so I said, absolutely, we'd be happy to show you our town. She's never been here before. But I also asked, do you want to go to breakfast? You know, so I didn't know, council, if you just want us to start here and we can just kind of meet with her and touch base. We can do some bagels or something here. We can go to Patty's. She's available as early as 7, but has to be out the door by 9:30. So we don't have to decide tonight, but I wanted to let you know, that's kind of cool. To be contacted, and they want to come down. So I'll be reaching out to you guys and see if you want to be there, what your preference is on what we do. And she's blocked it out on her calendar based on what we tell her. So I wanted you to have that heads up. And 2 more items, and I'll be done quickly. Not quickly, but 2 more items. You have a register in front of you. This is just straightforward the first 3 months of our calendar year expenses that we have paid out of our bank account. So, this is, it has, anything that we've spent money on out of our account. So I wanted you to have that documentation. My goal is that we're going to be doing this regularly, that you're going to see what we're spending money on. And so this is just a straight register of expenses. And granted, this is 3 months worth. Some of the stuff we've gotten reimbursed from grants and some of it is, from other things. So, we're not going to go over that tonight. I just wanted you to have it. If you have questions, let me know. And then the last item I have for you, I got a letter today, on Monday, the, ECSO staff came and we went and toured the mountain. So a few months ago, you're gonna remember that we got a request for an easement for Day Wireless to go up the hill. Prior to that easement being done, they had scraped the road going up from the reservoir up. They were anticipating fixing the road and putting some gravel in, and we kind of said, hey, what are you doing on our property, scraping a road before you have an easement? And so they stopped, then the rains came and it created damage to the road. So I have been in a mode of working with our legal counsel and them saying, we're not moving forward with an easement until you can agree to fix the damage that has been done by what was already there. And I know it wasn't a perfect road, but by the soil being disturbed, it caused more damage. So they sent me an agreement today, that says, as we work towards finalizing the road easement agreement, we are taking steps to ensure the road remains in good condition throughout the construction period. As part of this effort, we will reblade the road easement area and apply appropriately sized crushed rock before beginning construction activities related to the ECSO project. During construction, we will keep the road in good shape by adding rock or blading as necessary. And at the conclusion of the construction activities related to the ECSO project, we will add water bars and other appropriate stormwater mitigation measures to ensure proper drainage and road stability. When I brought you the easement, I knew it was Day Wireless. I didn't know it was about ECSO's radio stuff. We only found that out a couple weeks ago and immediately got involved with trying to find out what this is. So we're going to move forward with making sure that it's done right. We're going to be working on the maintenance of the whole road, but they're accounting for the damage that was done and they're going to take care of it. And they've agreed to do that so we can get this done. So we got that just this evening and I wanted to make sure to share that with you. So that is my manager's report.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything for the good of the order? This meeting is adjourned.